welcome back. So in this lecture we will be continuing our game development. Last time we made these three invaders and we gave them components such as rigid body, box collider, and the enemy controller script that we will now modify in order to enable them to be alive in our scene. Let's go ahead and open up. I'm just going to close League of Legends here, play the game earlier. I'm just going to close it now. Let's open up this script here. And let's go ahead and create a method for movement. And let's in the update method now call movement, since we will be going to be moving each frame. And each frame we want to be executing the code from this method that will be going to place now. So how Space Invaders usually work is they come up from the top and they go to the bottom, and then they have patterns of movement to maybe they move to the left or to the right. So now if you notice in my inspector, to the right the up and down is the y-axis and the left and right is the x-axis. So we need to get some movement going on those axes. So let's go ahead and open up our script. And in here I can say, well, first we need to get a reference to the rigid body. Let's go ahead and say rigid body, call this variable maybe rig. And when the game starts, we can say we grab the component. Oops. So rig equals get component rigid body basically grabs the rigid body of the game object, which allows us to reference each one of these values here and much more. So now in movement I can say rig equals actually rig.velocity, since we want to give it some kind of velocity, equals, and we can say vector3.up times, and since we're moving down we have to say negative speed. Okay, and now this should work if I give him some kind of speed value of 5, and if I drop this invader into the scene he should move downwards, and he in fact does move downwards. But we don't want him to move downwards, we want him to move down and to the left. So let's go ahead and instead of doing this, we don't want to use one vector. This vector3.up is only referring to, let me just grab the player, the up movement, the up vector. But we don't want that, we actually want two vectors, the right and the up. So instead of doing this, let's go ahead and say new vector, vector3, and open up the curly brackets, and the first value here is going to be x. So for x we're going to say speed times time.delta time, and then we get the y, which is minus speed times time.delta time, and for the z just leave it at 0. So now if I save this and go back into Unity, if I drop in my invader and move him like this, it does in fact move downwards, but very diagonally, but very slowly, because we did multiply by time.delta time, and we should increase our speed. So let's say 50. Let's try that. Okay, still slow. Let's say 80. Okay, maybe 120. Okay, I guess around 150 will be fine. But we don't want him to move in diagonally in one direction. We want him to be switching up directions. So let's go ahead and back in our script, let's create a boolean called direction switch. I'll call it direction switch. And basically a boolean can only be a 0 or a 1. And how we're going to do this is basically when this is a 0, we're going to move him to the right, and when it's a 1, we're going to move him to the left. So if it's true, if it's false, move to the 0, if it's 1, move to the right. And in the start method, let's set that direction switch to be equal to false. And in here, in the movement method, I'm going to say if direction switch is true, move him like this, else now we're wanting to move him on the left, so it's negative speed times time dot delta time, and again negative speed times time dot delta time, and 0 for the z axis. Okay, so now we have our movement, but now if the game starts, the direction switch is set to false and we never reset it. So let's go ahead and make use of this change timer value that we have here. We can make a new method called maybe I'm not so creative, let's say switch timer, sure, whatever. And basically what I want to do is each frame I want to say change timer minus equal time dot delta time, and if change timer is less than 0, I want to change the value of the direction switch. Basically, if direction switch is true, set it to false, else set it to true. And also we want to reset our change timer. But how do we know what was the first value of change timer? Since each frame now it is reduced, we don't know what was the original value. So to get the original value, we need to create a new, let's call it float max timer. And when the game starts, let's go ahead and say max timer is equal to change timer. And now when change timer is less than 0 and we want to reset it, we simply say change timer is equal to max timer. Okay, so let's save this and head back into Unity. And here our invader is placed, and I can drag him up and run this. So you can see the change timer is 1, so every second he should change directions, but I forgot to call the switch timer method in the update method, so sorry about that. Let's say switch timer. There we go. And let's go ahead and now run the game. Should see him walking left and then he's walking right. There we go. He has a pattern, and we can of course increase the change timer speed here. Now that this will result in a different movement. So he's going for, you can see the timer here decreasing slowly. And the good thing here is we can take these different invaders and just give them different speed values and different change timers, and now they instantly work. You don't have to do any code setup because they're basically the same. Now in the next lecture we're going to be polishing things up. We will give them health, and we'll make sure that they start at different they start walking in different directions. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next lecture.